Hello again, everyone. Edwin Leonard back once again. In this YouTube astrological segment, I'm going to be dissertating and talking about Mercury transiting the 12th house in a natal chart. Now, on average, I'll say if you have an average size house and it's like 30 degrees, which is the average size house, your Mercury will transit it if it's direct during the whole time of the transit, between 2 to 4 weeks on average. However, if your house size is bigger and or Mercury is retrograde for any part of this transit, then of course it's going to be longer. So anyway, well, Mercury in transiting the 12th is rather interesting. I mean, there's a lot of different things could be going on. You may have more communication in solitude and seclusion during this time. You might be more introverted and introspective. You might be doing a lot of self-analysis and thinking about things in the past, being very reflective. The important thing to remember in this transit, I believe, is just not to lament too much over past wrongs and past mistakes. And if you think about them, just try to learn from them and rectify those errors and apply them to the future. Now, your mind might be more focused on limitations and restrictions during this time. Thinking might be connected with your secret sorrows. There might be some things that are hurt that you have felt that have hurt you that you don't share with others, that have made you despondent and sad and dejected. These things may strongly be on your mind during this period. There might be some cerebral work in private. You may have more of an ability to work more by yourself during this time, independently as opposed to with others, and you might get more accomplished as far as things maybe connected with writing or any form of communication. There might be your thoughts might be more suppressed at this time. You might be more instead of a even if you are a conversation dominator in general, the odds are you'll be less likely to be one during this transit, and you're more likely to let the other person, others voice their views and talk more and be more of a listener than usual. And another thing is there might be more of an interest. You might be thinking about maybe things connected maybe with the metaphysical, maybe things connected with filmography, videography. In some isolated cases, there might be conversation perhaps with somebody that may be incarcerated or imprisoned, or somebody that might share some kind of past prison experience because the 12th house is connected with imprisonment, or there might be some talk with somebody that might be confined or might be in hospitalization. So those are some things to look at as well. And I think things in this particular transit, it's possible that you may have things said that are more likely to be misconstrued or might be seen as ambiguous than most transits. There might be more of an interest perhaps in spirituality. And there may be this might be a time where secrets might more likely be ready to be or might be unveiled during this time. It could be a period where really, even if your chart suggests something where you're very extroverted or gregarious, at this time you might prefer the time by yourself as opposed to being with others. And the thing about this is the 12th house is also connected with secret enemies or adversaries. So it might be a time where you might be doing a lot of thinking connected with like who might be your real friends and who are the ones that are real and the ones that are not true. Are there some that are maybe secretly almost like an enemy to you, or might be doing things secretly that might be working to your detriment, bad mouthing you, for example, and when you're not around, and things of that nature. So those are some things to consider as far as this transit goes. Now, it could also be this could be a time when you look at this, is that you might be more likely. Well, you look at Mercury And Mercury is connected with siblings and neighbors. So it could be a time where maybe if you have siblings, that's if you have them, and or neighbors, might be figuring maybe more prominently in your private matters, or they might be a little bit more inquisitive maybe about what you're doing in private, or maybe you decide to share a little bit more with them than you usually do. So anyway, it's also important to look at the sign that Mercury is transiting for either the majority or the whole time of this transit, as this could flavor the transit. So let's say, for example, that let's say Mercury is in Taurus for either the entire time of the transit or the majority of the transit. Well, this could indicate that there might be some communication in seclusion, in private, uh, perhaps with people you know in your private life, that might be done in a very deliberate, methodical fashion, and your mind might be very persistent and maybe unyielding even on some of the things that you talk about at this time. And let's say, for another example, that Mercury is transiting Gemini in the 12th house for either the majority or the whole time of the transit. Well, this could be a point where you might actually be nearly garrulous in terms of how you're talking with people in your private life, in seclusion, in solitude, or maybe something connected with the 12th house, such as spirituality, such as the metaphysical, and you might actually be somewhat loquacious, but in private more in these matters, as opposed to outside of your private sphere. Well, it's also important to look at the aspects that are made to your natal planets and points in your chart from this transit, as this could impact the transit. Now, let's say that the transit Mercury in the 12th house is making a square in conjunct or opposition to your natal moon sign. Well, this could indicate that the matters that you're talking about, things connected with things behind the scenes, things in private, seclusion, solitude, these things, the people you may speak with, is where you might experience where maybe your emotions might cloud rational or logical thinking during this time, and maybe it may be best maybe to wait until that transiting aspect passes before making any kind of decisions that you're trying to make in private. So anyway, another example, let's say that transiting Mercury is in the 12th house, is making a sextile or trine to your natal Mercury at this point in time. Well, the communications that you do during this time in private, in seclusion, in solitude, or something connected with the 12th house, such as perhaps astrology, the metaphysical, something with spiritual, filmography, videography, things that it's apt to be where you can be very clear and lucid and perspicacious during this time, and also understanding others on the other end of the communication will come out in a very lucid and clear manner, very likely, and you're apt to be able to figure out things very easily at this time, more so than usual. Well, anyway, people, that'll conclude this YouTube astrological segment for Mercury transiting the 12th house in a natal chart, and stay tuned next time where I'll be dissertating and talking about Venus transiting the 1st house in a natal chart. Two things I want to get with you on before I head out. Firstly, the stars may impel, but do not compel. And secondly, never isolate any single astrological element, aspect, planetary placement, position, configuration, influence, or what have you, and make an analysis of a person, astrologically speaking, based on this alone. Because astrologically speaking, the person is the sum of all their components in their natal chart, and not just one. Until next time, people, stay well.